Hello there, I'm Randy Skretvet, the author of Laurel and Hardy, The Magic Behind the Movies, and you and I are going to watch Duck Soup. Now, this title, Ideal Comedy, this is a British distributor, and you'll notice there was no credit for Oliver Hardy or anybody but Stan Laurel. I bet that the original American titles probably said Madeline Herlock in Duck Soup, because she's the only person mentioned in the posters and advertising artwork put out by the Pathé Exchange. Now, in case you were mystified by the title Duck Soup, that was a slang phrase popular in the 1920s referring to an easy task. It was used again as the title of the Marx Brothers feature for Paramount in 1933. Edgar Kennedy appeared in that film and starred in yet a third Duck Soup, that one an RKO two-reeler made in 1942. Now, you're seeing Colonel Buckingham Blood. The script specifies it is to be played as it is by James A. Marcus. He was 59 years old the time this film was made. He'd been active in film since 1915, and he would continue after this film to be a busy actor for another decade, playing mayors and sea captains and judges in another 60-plus movies, many of them B-westerns. He was born in 1867 in New York City, died in 1937 in Hollywood. He has 117 film credits from 1915 to 1937, and he worked right until the end. He had 6 films in waiting for release in the year of his death in 1937. Now, we are going to go to Westlake Park, known since 1942 as MacArthur Park. It's at 2230 West 6th Street in Los Angeles, and 6th Street will figure prominently in the footage that you'll see in just a moment. This scene was reworked in the beginning of Pack Up Your Troubles, where Laurel and Hardy were trying to keep from being drafted into serving in the World War. And it's interesting. This is the first film where Laurel and Hardy are essentially the stars of the film, and already they have a tremendous rapport with each other. So you wonder why it then took several more movies before they again achieved this level of cohesion. You're going to see Forest Ranger McFidget in a moment. In the script, the lead Forest Ranger was supposed to be a, quote, type like Tiny Sanford, unquote. Tiny Sanford, a nemesis in a lot of Laurel and Hardy films later on. But in the film, he's played by Bob Cortman. And Bob Cortman has the meanest, most haunted eyes in the history of movies. You're going to see those in just a moment. There he is. He had a lengthy career, appearing in 270 films between 1914 and 1952, did a lot of B-westerns, and as far as Laurel and Hardy films are concerned, he would later show up in bit parts in Pardon Us, Bohunks, and The Midnight Patrol, where he and Charlie Hall played tire thieves. This is interesting. Laurel and Hardy are the only comedy team where you can see the team forming on film. Other teams in movies came from vaudeville or Broadway or burlesque or radio, but Laurel and Hardy come together over the series of films that you will see in this package. Some later Hal Roach Studio press releases called this film Duck Soup the first Laurel and Hardy comedy, and in fact there were articles in the movie industry trade papers announcing the birth of a new comedy team, but it really would be almost exactly another year before they were truly the Laurel and Hardy we know and love. Once again, we are in Westlake Park, or MacArthur Park, and before long you will see how movies create their own geography, because before long we're going to go from 6th Street. Now we're in Culver City. Here we are, and we're on Culver Boulevard heading north up Main Street in Culver City. And when these Rangers get into a car, as they will right now, they are at 3848 Main Street in Culver City. Okay, now we're going to downtown Los Angeles again, 6th Street once again. And we're in downtown Los Angeles on South Grand Avenue at 6th Street looking south. And that white building on the left is 624 South Grand Avenue. We're going uphill now on South Grand Avenue at 3rd Street. And before long, that bicycle chain is going to snap. There it goes. So we're going toward 3rd Street. Now, that entire hill has been removed because of the Bunker Hill Urban Renewal Project. If you go to YouTube and go to Chris Bungo Studios, B-U-N-G-O, there are a lot of wonderful then and now location films for a lot of Laurel and Hardy pictures, including Duck Soup. Now, those 2 buses originally in the script were going to be streetcars, but it was easier to work with buses because the studio could rent those. And now, on the Grand Avenue, 4th, 5th, and 6th Streets in downtown LA. Oh, here we go. This mansion, it's no longer there, but it used to be at 815 North Alpine Drive, on the southwest corner of Sunset. And we will also see that house used as the governor's mansion in the movie The Second 100 Years. Ah, my goodness me. And that's pretty much most of the location shooting, although you'll see the house again in the closing scenes. Now, from here on, the film is pretty much closely remade in 1930 as Another Fine Mess. And again, both are based on the 1905 sketch by Stan's father, Home from the Honeymoon. Now, the maid here, it's specified in the script to be played by Ma Lavarney, or Laura Lavarney, born 1853, died in 1939. She was born in Missouri, and she appeared in more than 80 films between 1913 and 1930, most notably the Mabel Normand films Mickey and Raggedy Rose, which was co-written by Stan. She's also in a Hal Roach short in which Babe appears called The Honorable Mr. Buggs. And the butler is played by William Courtwright, who we would see in the 1929 Laurel and Hardy short That's My Wife, where he plays Uncle Bernal. And he made one talkie film, which is Teacher's Pet, and he looks off as Miss Crabtree is driving away, and he says, wow, I wouldn't mind going back to school myself. So that's the only film where we get to hear his voice. Now you are going to see the the genesis of the film's title in this title. There it is, Duck Soup, My Good Hives. And I'm not sure if the text of these titles is exactly as you would have found in the American print. I suspect there are changes for the English audiences. All right, now is Colonel Blood. There comes the conductor, Stuart Holmes. Now, Stuart Holmes was originally supposed to play the part of the man who comes to rent the mansion. Instead, he got this small part as a train conductor, but fear not, he was in about 600 movies between 1910 and 1964, and he was a very busy actor. Now, here we have this sumptuous feast. Now, either the butler and maid didn't clean up after last night's dinner, and in fact, the original opening of the film, as written, was a dream sequence where the two vagrants were feasting like this, but were rudely awakened. And in fact, you can read the entire script for Duck Soup in my book, The Laurel and Hardy Movie Scripts. Sorry for the commercial, but I thought you might want to read that. Now, we're going to see a title here which will give the name of the people who are coming to rent the place. And it's very interesting. Mr. and Mrs. Cyrus B. Quick. There we go. Well, you know, the script specifies Lord and Lady Tarbotham. Now, in the sketch that Stan Laurel's father wrote, they were Percy and Lydia Fitzhuggins. In Stan's script, once again, they were Lord and Lady Tarbotham. In the 1930 remake, Another Fine Mess, they were Lord Leopold Ambrose Plumtree and his otherwise unnamed wife. Now you're seeing Madeline Herlock as the wife there. She made almost all of her films for Max Sennett. The distributor of this film in the United States, the Pathé Exchange, gave her the big star treatment. They listed only her name on the posters and publicity artwork. Now, which is kind of confusing because she was not a particularly big star, and she doesn't really do anything here that could not be handled by another capable actress. So one kind of wonders why she got the star billing, and neither Laurel nor Hardy were mentioned on the poster, although Stan is pictured. But his name is not on the poster, and nor is Oliver Hardy's. And they're really the stars of the show. By the way, Stan, of course, is in drag here, and he would appear in female clothing in 8 Laurel and Hardy films all told, which we will see again in Why Girls Love Sailors. Now, from 1918 through 1921, when Stan was in vaudeville, touring up and down the United States, ceaselessly, he dressed in women's clothes in a vaudeville sketch called No Mother to Guide Her. So 1918, 1919, 1920, 1920, 4 years, he was doing this sketch, usually about 3 times a day or more, dressing up as sort of an old biddy character, as they used to call them, he with his partner May Laurel. So appearing in feminine attire was nothing new at all for Stan Laurel. And of course, in Another Fine Mess, he's not only the maid Agnes, he's also the butler Hives. And they sort of improve upon the gag by having him continually having to change from butler's clothes to maid's clothes. Here, he's the maid all the way through. This is a cute gag that's not in the script, where Stan brings this a very diminutive chair for Ollie, and Ollie doesn't have to say anything. His size speaks volumes. There we go. There's a much more suitable chair for Mr. Hardy, or Marmaduke Maltravers. That's right. That's his name. Oh, here we go. Here's the billiard room gag. This is also in the remake, the 1930 remake of Another Fine Mess, and they spend quite a bit more time on it in that. Of course, that film, being a talkie, has the addition of sound, and you get to hear Ollie describing different aspects of the mansion as he's panic-stricken trying to find the billiard room, which, of course, he doesn't even know if they really have one. And also, another nice addition in the sound version is dialogue between Stan and the lady who comes to rent the house. In that case, in the film in 1930, it's played by Thelma Todd. And they engage in quite a bit of conversation, some of which is a little suggestive, being that that is a pre-code movie. We don't have that here. However, we will have, later on, a sequence which definitely would not have passed the code, which was implemented in July of 1934. That's when censorship came in, and it lasted pretty much intact through 1968. And that's when they came in with the rating system of G, PG, R, and X. Now, we have those forest rangers. They're still out there. Good thing that the filmmakers kept reminding us that they're out there, because they're going to come into play again later in this movie. Now, the dress that Madeline Herlock wears is rather interesting. I don't know who's culpable for that hat. But anyway, I would guess that the original titles would have a credit for Gowns by Lambert. A lot of the early silents have that. That was William Lambert, who was only 23 years old at the time. However, he knew the film costuming business because he was related to Edward P. Lambert, the founder of the Associated Costume Company in Hollywood. Hal Roach brought him to the studio to design costumes for Mabel Normand in a movie called The Nickel Hopper, and he stayed on to design dresses for Vivian Oakland and Martha Sleeper and other Hal Roach comedians. And later he created designs at the Fox studio from 1933 through 1936 for films such as The Little Colonel with Shirley Temple. Now again, this is the only Hal Roach comedy that Madeline Herlock appeared in. She otherwise appeared primarily in Mack Sennett comedies from 1923 through 1928, although she had started as an extra at Universal, and she also appeared in some features for the First National Studio. And again, it's possible that she made this one and only one Hal Roach picture in exchange for Oliver Hardy's services in his one and only one Mack Sennett comedy, Crazy to Act, which was filmed a month before Duck Soup. Now, she is probably best remembered for her scene in a 1926 Mack Sennett short called Circus Today, in which a lion powders her back with his tail, and that is excerpted in the Robert Youngson compilation, The Golden Age of Comedy. She was evidently attracted to playwrights because she was married to playwright Mark Connolly from 1930 to 1935, and to playwright Robert E. Sherwood from 1935 until his death in 1955. I'm always amazed at the interior design of these Hal Roach films. It's very ornate, and you would think that these films cost a fortune, but they were, of course, made for a very modest sum. The Hal Roach studios always had to be very cost-conscious. And they're never credited, but I do know that at least in 1927-28, a lot of the Hal Roach films had art direction by Ted Driscoll and Harry Hopkins, so they may well be the gentlemen responsible for the very elegant look of the interiors in this film. Of course, the Hal Roach studio, it was entirely self-contained. They had a scenery dock, they had their own wood mill, their own planing factory, where they could make props, and they had their own prop department, they had their own wardrobe and costume departments, so they didn't need to borrow anything from other studios. They were entirely self-sufficient, and, what a shame that the entire studio was demolished in 1963. Especially now when they're crying for studio space. And again, here we have a scene which probably would not have survived after the code came in 1934. You're going to see some shots of Madeline Herlock walking, those are probably made with what they called an IMO camera. It was a very small camera. It held only 100 feet of film, or just about a minute. It was really small, and you could get really close shots like this in very cramped quarters. And that's probably how they did these, because they look like they're handheld. This gag of Stan hiding underwater as if he's an ostrich, that is used again in the 1931 film Come Clean, where Stan is hiding in the bathroom along with a crazy woman played by Mae Bush, whom he is trying to keep hidden from the wives and also from a detective who's knocking on the door. Here, however, Stan, of course, is painfully aware that he is a man, and he was very relieved to see that Madeline has dressed herself before coming into the room here, because he did not want to see her in the altogether. And there he goes again. Uh-oh, here comes Colonel Blood to the rescue, at least the rescue of his bow and arrow. My goodness, these two vagrants have certainly done an awful lot of packing in a hurry. One wonders where they're going to take all this stuff and where they got those trunks. Anyway, that scene where they're bouncing, that reminds me of a film called Six of a Kind, where Charlie Ruggles and Mary Boland are about to go on a trip, and Charlie Ruggles says to Mary Boland, "Flora, bounce." And she does what the gentleman just did there in order to close the trunk. There's that gag again of the thumb on the doorbell. That's not in the script. It's rather cute. The sort of nice running gag framing device. And, there you see that backdrop in the background there. That you'll see that in a lot of Hal Roach comedies. Rather than shoot on location and have something actually across the street, they just have a nice backdrop there on the studio stage. Now, of course, Colonel Blood has no idea what's going on, and he's rather upset at seeing his house stripped of all of its furnishings. And here Stan sees the portrait of the master of the house and realizes what he just did there, his face to his cheek. They used to call that the fig bar. That's that kind of reaction, the fig bar. I don't know why they call it that. I have no idea. But silent comedy scriptwriters have a language all their own. And now poor Colonel Blood is going to be apoplectic at the goings-on that have happened in his brief sojourn away from his home. And, of course, the butler and maid are gone, so goodness only knows where they've gone. Now, in a moment, you're going to see a title with a British expression, which is barmy. And Americans don't really use that. So that makes me think that, once again, these titles were changed for the British audience. Also, the typeface is different from what you would see in an American print of this. There was an interesting story that Jack McCabe, Stan Laurel's friend and biographer, used to tell. He said Stan loved to visit stationery stores. This would be in the early 1960s. And one time, the clerk at the stationery store said, "Say, don't I know you from movies? Aren't you?" And Stan said, "I'm Oliver Hardy." And the guy said, "Right." He said, "Hey, whatever happened to Laurel?" And Stan said, "He went barmy." There it is. Don't be barmy, sir. Yeah, I think they would have said, "Don't be crazy" in an American print. Because barmy, while being a very colorful word, is not one that we use here in the States. Now you know that Colonel Blood is really the owner because he knows where the gun is kept. And so now we're going to pretty soon exit and be outside that actual mansion once again. As Stan unceremoniously carries off Madeline Herlock. Here's that gag again with the, there's Bobby Dunn, diminutive Bobby Dunn. Of course, for a moving man, a guy that you would normally want to be about 6'2" and 280 muscular pounds, they get the smallest guy possible as a gag for the moving man, because this little guy has to carry these heavy, heavy trunks and other terribly heavy things. Bobby Dunn, we remember mostly as the little man in the Laurel and Hardy 1935 short Tit for Tat, where he's the guy who says, "How do you do?" and systematically shoplifts everything from Laurel and Hardy's appliance store. Now here we are once again outside that real mansion. There's Bob Cortman again. and stands about to be discovered in more ways than one. By the way, that white building that you'll see in the background in some of these shots, you don't see it right there, but hang on. You'll see it again. It's the Max Whittier mansion there at the right corner there. That was the Max Whittier mansion. No longer there, unfortunately. It's a shame how many beautiful, beautiful buildings in the 1920s no longer exist. But thank goodness we do have the films to see what they looked like in their prime many, many years ago. Now, fired in more ways than one. We're going to go back now to Culver City. We're near 8885 Carson Street. That's the house in the background. Now, this open field was still part of Hal Roach Studio property, but the house which you're going to see was a private home. There it is, that big white house. This is where Laurel and Hardy filmed Helpmates, where they had the house that was burned down at the end of Helpmates was on this field that actually was part of the Hal Roach Studio property. And it's time for us to go. Thank you for listening.